what I've actually done here is on my template I have two chisel marks which mark the length of the head that I wanted, if you can just see that on there. Again, this is another thing for standardisation. If you're making multiple batches, if you can make things so they're much easier to produce, that are consistent. What I just put a small chalk mark at it was a very dull red, just enough so you can see the chalk, and then just very lightly ran it along the edge of the hide with the hammer. You can see that's put a crease in the metal. Now when I put it in the forge and have it at full cutting heat, it's got to be very hot so that it cuts cleanly. Doesn't matter how hot that will be, that mark will still be there. If you just use a piece of chalk now and marked it and put it straight in the fire, when it got to temperature the chalk will have disappeared. So what we need to do now is get this up to a really good, nice, really hot heat. It doesn't have to be quite a forging heat, but it just has to be suitably hot along the bar section. But what you have to be careful of is, because the socket now is much thinner, much thinner, that can burn away much quickly if you're not keeping attention. So you've got to just heat that bit that you want. Then we're going to put it on the edge of the hardy, and then we're going to run round and we're going to cut it out. Now by running that along the edge of the hardy, it keeps the cut all the way around. If you just held it in one position and just kept cutting through, you'd end up introducing flats on this part, which is something that we don't want to do, because the idea of this head is to have a nice round socket and a nice round shoulder going into a nice even square point. Because it's now taken it to quite a narrow waist, we can now just grip it with a pair of pliers and simply break it off. That's that done with now. The bar's now finished, so now we've got the socket, we've got the start of the shoulder, we've just got to forge this bit now into the point to make the head. So we can do away with the hardy, and we'll go back to the original arrow stake that we had earlier on. We'll get the head nice and hot again, and we'll forge the point. But instead of using a pair of pliers, because obviously you're going to get your fingers burnt trying to get it into the flames, I'm going to use the special shaped tongs that I showed you earlier. With it's got the taper and the overlapping out piece that fits over the socket neatly like that. That means you've now got plenty of room to work in the fire without burning your fingers. And we're going to get the point, just the point nice and hot, and then draw it out. We use the lighter hammer and we're going to draw the point out. What I'm actually doing here is I'm holding the tongs away from me like so. It's on the edge of the surface with the hammer pointing with an angle like so that it creates the point, but it doesn't interfere with either the shoulder or the socket. If you work initially across you like this, if you're not square on, you can start to get the head shape will be quite awkward. But for a start off, we have it pointing like so, and what I do is I give it 2 taps. Then I turn it 90 degrees, give it another 2 taps and turn it another 90 degrees, like so, and I keep turning it round. By doing that, what that will do is it will forge the taper out evenly, and it will keep it nice and in line with the rest of the socket. If it is slightly bent over to one side when we've finished, we can correct that later on. But all it is a question of now is to keep on working on drawing out this point until you get a nice point to the length that you actually want. Now that we've got it the sort of length we want, now we can go on to the work on the edge and work across. And what that does is that will actually produce the flats and you can actually see as you're working now that it's going in line with each other. If we go on the edge on this round piece here, and now we're still working at black heat, that is still very hot even though it's not glowing red. If we roll it along the edge, we can now just tidy up the back of the socket. We can still planish it like we did before. Now that we are still working with black heat, we can actually hold it with a pair of pliers, and I can actually see now that although this is nicely formed, it's slightly leaning that way. What I need to do now is to get it warm again, and then when I place it onto the flat of the arrow stake, if I just tap it around here, it will actually straighten it up. What you need to do is the point needs to be perfectly in line with the socket, and like I say, to do that I do need it warm. Okay, all I do now is I just quench it so I can hold it in my fingers and just have a final inspection with it. So now, just by looking at, one way of looking at it is to hold it up into the air with the light as a background, turn it round, and you can see that that is nice and even. It's all in line, and it's a nice even taper. No bottleneck, no flats that are unnecessary. If you look inside it, you can see that that's nice and round. It's a nice wall thickness. I spoke earlier about having a master head that you always keep, you don't sell it or whatever. And if we put the two next to it, you can actually see that that is now virtually the same as the master head. So that one can, that one can go off. That's finished. If any grinding needs to be done at all, if you want to, you can just touch the faces up like on the edges with the side of the wheel of the grindstone, which I'll do to show you, and that will just make it that it really is just the icing on the cake, really. So what I'll do is I'll take the arrow stake out, I'll put the grinder in, and then we'll just touch the edges up, and then that's that head finished. Again, by using the side of the wheel like we did when we were doing the end of the socket, I'm just basically going to hold the arrow against each, and in turn just touch the face like so, till we get all the flats nicely ground. So I'll start it up. So that's just sharpen the point, sharpen the edges, and really if there is anything that you just want to do, just a wire brush, just to get off any of the oxide that's been left from the forging process. And that's it, and that's the head finished. If I put it on the anvil at the side of my master head, and then you can see the finished product. Okay, this is it. It's now finished. If I place it next to my master pattern, you can see that it's absolutely identical. And that is the secret of batch making, that you make them all the same. If you're going to make these for a customer, the last thing you want is one head different to the next. You know, if you have to, somebody buys a dozen arrowheads and not one of them are the same, it doesn't look very good. Whereas if you can get all 12 arrowheads identical, they look as if they've been made on a factory production line, even though they are hand forged heads. It really adds quality to the product. So again, you can say the neatness of the socket, its roundness, uniform thickness, all that that's what we're looking for. So that's a Type 10 finished, and with a bit of practice and a bit of skill, there's no reason why a beginner can't be making heads like that fairly soon.